Hey Elijah, it's Dr. Scott. I have some feedback for you on your visual analysis draft. Quick reminder of what I'm looking for in this assignment. I'm looking for a thesis statement that's clear and focused, that has strong supporting reasons, and I think of the supporting reasons being your body paragraphs. There's a good connection between the body paragraphs and what you're trying to do in the paper as a whole. I'm also looking at your use of supporting details and whether or not you can discuss those supporting details in a way that explains how they connect to the paragraph's overall point. Looking for organization and transitions. Do you have paragraphs placed in a location that makes sense? Is there a reason why they're placed in the way that you have them? And are you using transitions to kind of indicate how the ideas are connected? Also looking for a couple paraphrases to be integrated into the revision rather, and also MLA format, a visual, and a paragraph without any be verbs. So where I think what we can talk about a bit is the supporting details, maybe a little bit about the thesis statement, and I can also say something about your organization and use of transitions. I think here is where let's see, it's these two sentences here. Puts you in a specific part of Portsmouth history. You can connect with the past and gain an impression on how the people felt during each moment. It's this word here that I think that's what the essay is about. It's about how the murals convey emotion. The problem that I think I'm having is that with a thesis statement that's really long, it's 2 sentences worth, I'm not always sure, like, is this the thing that you're trying to argue here? I felt it was this. I think some kind of pruning down that thesis statement. I think definitely getting it into 1 sentence, and then cutting words that you don't need. I think that'd be a good improvement. I think where you have quite a bit of revising to do, I think that's an easy fix. And I think you're a pretty decent writer, and I think you're going to be okay getting that figured out. What is going to be a heavier lift is making sure that you're explaining your details and how they connect to the paragraph's overall main point, but then also making sure that your paragraphs are all supporting that argument. There were places in your essay where it felt like you were telling me about the murals, but you weren't exactly explaining how the details in that paragraph were helping to back up your main point. And so that happened in a few places. And there were also places where I felt like you could have used more concrete detail. Here is one place. Bittersweet Moment shows a physical and emotional drainage of the citizens. I think that is definitely a place where you could have gone in. Like, where did you see that emotional drainage? Like, it's definitely there. In the 1937 flood mural, you could definitely point to specific places, like when folks are lined up. You can definitely describe that drainage, that despair, that depression. I think you could totally do that. A sentence like that just kind of tells me. And just saying that they're a long line waiting for what looks like clean water, that's not kind of conveying this thing that you're saying that it conveys. But I think making it really clear, like, how the paragraph relates to the paper's overall main point. There are places where you do that a better job than others. Like, I think you're doing it here. You do it pretty effectively. I think the one question that I have for you is related to organization. When it comes to this paragraph, the question I have for you is, like, why begin here? Why is this paragraph the place to begin your essay about how feeling is conveyed in the two murals that you've chosen? So that's a question for the rest of the paragraphs. Like, if you begin with this, there needs to be a reason why, and then when you go to the next paragraph, there needs to be a reason why that's the next paragraph that you go to. And that might take some thinking, but you need to see that in the revision. The Good Times Remembered mural, that's a tough one to write about sometimes. And you're writing about emotion, which is, like, that's great. I think that's definitely in the 37 flood. You could also argue that it tries to evoke emotion in Good Times Remembered. I think being clear like what it is you're trying to argue. Are you trying to argue that we're supposed to feel the emotions that the people at that time felt? Or are we supposed to just feel emotions that Dafford is trying to set up for us? And that's different. So if we're supposed to feel despair that the folks in the 1937 flood had, that's a very different thing than trying to make us feel sad for what those people went through. It's different. It seems like it's subtle, but it's a different thing. So I think being clear like what it is you're trying to argue in terms of emotion, that's an important step. Writing about emotion in Good Times Remembered is a little bit more difficult. You can definitely do it. As far as like what people at the time people at the time felt, and maybe arguing that Dafford wants us to feel what folks at that time felt, that's a bit hard to do with the Good Times Remembered, because you don't see people all that often. So you kind of need to think that through a little bit. It might be tweaking the paper's overall argument in terms of emotion, and I think you might be able to. You can definitely write about this mural. It's just going to be a little bit tougher for you to bring them together. I do think that the murals need to kind of come together. Or I'm sorry, the paragraphs need to come together. And if you're writing about facial expressions, you need to bring them together. The paragraphs need to be about how the murals get an idea across. Paragraph should not be about here's mural 1 and then here's mural 2 in another paragraph. I totally get the ad clincher thing. I like those notes. I use them myself. Do make sure that you are connecting these details and you're connecting everything kind of back to the paper's overall argument. So if the overall argument is that the murals do a good job of getting us to feel an emotion, the clincher is, hey, here's the different ways that in this mural Dafford got us to feel an emotion. So the setting paragraph, towards the end of the draft, I had a harder time seeing how things were connected to emotion. I think you can do that here, definitely with 37 Flood. I think you can even do it here. My money would be on you figuring that out, how to talk about emotion in terms of this. And I see happiness, being ecstatic, like, okay, cool. I think Elijah can figure that out. Where I'm not seeing the focus on emotion is when we get to the setting paragraph. I'm not sure what's going on here and how this is kind of related to emotion. I see words that are kind of buried. Chaos, okay. Serious and graveness. I think you need to kind of clarify what the paragraph is trying to do, and then make sure that all the writing is helping you do that. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting, this is kind of a side thing, both of your murals that you've chosen are, like, they feature water prominently, but very different, in very different ways. One, water is not controlled, and the other, Dreamland. Water is controlled, and it's used for our enjoyment, for our pleasure. That's kind of an interesting thing. It just made me think of it, and I don't know if that goes anywhere in your draft. But your draft made me think of that. It got me thinking a little bit more about what the murals are trying to convey. There's one place where I thought you did a good job of kind of bringing me back to the overall point. I just kind of want to like highlight this as something that to do throughout your essay. So you give me some good details, and you do an excellent job of describing things, and then you have the sentence afterwards: the still waters of the flood signaled that the pain and misery that the flood put the citizens through cause finally ended, which would then start new beginnings for the city. Like, okay, all right, there you're kind of explaining what that that black and white, those use of colors, you're kind of explaining the significance of them and kind of connecting them to the paper's overall argument. More of that is needed. More reminders like that are needed throughout the paper. Again, the setting paragraph, I'm having a tough time kind of understanding what the emotion is there and how it's getting at emotion. Not saying that you can't get it. Not saying that you're not doing it in a handful of places in that paragraph. But right now I'm not seeing it kind of come together as well as the other paragraphs. So a quick overview of where the essay needs to go. That idea of explaining the details in your paper, the details from the murals that you include in your paper, connecting them to the paragraph's overall main point and connecting them to the paper's overall argument. That's a huge issue to address. I think rethinking your organization, I'm not sure why you've set paragraphs up in the way that you have, and it's a draft. It's something that you can figure out over time, but it's something that needs to be addressed. There's other issues to address as well. Integrating those paraphrases, getting a visual integrated, cutting some be verbs in a paragraph, and NLA formatting. So I like where the start is, and I'm happy to answer your questions. You got a revision of this that's due Monday, November the 4th. So if you got questions, make sure that you're asking me next week. All right, Elijah, that's it for now.